Breaking developments are emerging tonight that intelligence agencies in Washington, London, and Tokyo are describing as the most dangerous geopolitical chain reaction since the Cold War. Stop what you are doing, because what has just landed in the last 90 minutes changes the architecture of this conflict in ways that nobody fully predicted. Israeli forces have struck a building in the Syrian capital of Damascus, and not just any building. According to 3 senior Western intelligence officials who spoke on condition of anonymity, the structure was a North Korean operational facility, a coordination hub where North Korean military advisors, Russian intermediaries, and Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders were allegedly meeting to accelerate the next phase of a weapons transfer pipeline that has been running quietly for over 2 years. The building is gone, casualty reports are still coming in, and Kim Jong-un has already responded. North Korean state media released a statement within the last hour declaring what his government is calling a state of maximum wartime mobilization against what he describes as the Zionist entity operating as a military instrument of American imperialism. His exact words: "Israel has crossed the final threshold from which there is no return." Sit with that for a moment, because here is the conflict pair that defines everything happening right now. On one side, Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who has been governing Israel through the most consequential and legally embattled period in that nation's modern history, who made a deliberate, calculated decision to strike a facility that he knew would drag a nuclear-armed regime into direct confrontation. On the other side, Kim Jong-un, the most unpredictable nuclear-armed leader on the planet, a man whose entire political identity, whose entire grip on power, whose entire legacy inside the North Korean state apparatus is built on one thing and one thing only: the projection of absolute invincibility. You do not make a statement like no return and then do nothing, because if you blink, you are finished inside your own system, and that is not speculation. That is the fundamental logic of Pyongyang's survival strategy. Start with what was actually inside that Damascus facility, because the building Netanyahu ordered destroyed was not a diplomatic courtesy call. According to intelligence assessments, including a partially declassified report from 11 months ago, North Korea has been supplying long-range artillery shells, ballistic missile guidance components, and advanced drone jamming technology to Russia, which has in turn been funneling a portion of that hardware toward Iranian proxy networks operating across Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. Israel has been watching this pipeline for 18 months, mapping the nodes of this network, identifying the key coordination points, and tracking the movement of personnel between Pyongyang, Moscow, and Tehran. What was struck in Damascus was the nerve center of that network, the physical location where the 3 streams of this axis converged into a single operational hub, and Netanyahu knew exactly what was in that building before he gave the order. This was not a miscalculation. This was a message, and Kim Jong-un received that message within minutes and has now sent one back. Here is the chain reaction that defense analysts have been warning about in classified briefings for the past 24 months. The scenario nobody wanted to say out loud until tonight, because tonight it is no longer theoretical. North Korea supplies weapons to Russia. Russia transfers technology to Iranian proxy networks. Iranian proxies use that technology against Israel. Israel strikes the coordination hub connecting all 3. North Korea declares a wartime mobilization posture. South Korea goes to elevated alert. Japan does the same. China watches every move and calculates its own response. One strike, one building, one decision made by one man in Jerusalem. And suddenly 6 nuclear-armed countries are connected in a web of reaction and counterreaction with no clear endpoint. That is not a regional conflict anymore. That is the architecture of a global crisis. Now focus on Kim Jong-un's nuclear capability specifically, because this is the part of the story that should make every person watching right now lean forward in their seat. North Korea possesses between 45 and 60 nuclear warheads by current intelligence estimates, and that number has grown every single year for the past decade. It has successfully tested intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching not just the American West Coast, but the entire continental United States. The Hwasong-17, North Korea's most powerful tested ICBM, has a demonstrated range of over 15,000 kilometers, putting Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York all within reach. It has deployed hypersonic glide vehicles that travel at speeds exceeding Mach 10 and maneuver unpredictably during descent, specifically designed to defeat the terminal high-altitude area defense systems the United States has positioned across the Pacific. It has miniaturized nuclear warheads to a size compatible with ballistic missile delivery. According to a Defense Intelligence Agency assessment that was leaked 3 years ago and never officially denied, and Kim Jong-un has demonstrated repeatedly, consistently, and without exception that he treats red lines drawn by the international community as coordinates to aim at rather than boundaries. To respect, he does the thing analysts say he will not do. He goes further than the threshold everyone agreed was the point of no return, and he does it at the exact moment the world is most distracted and least prepared. The world right now is maximally distracted. The Iran-US-Israel war entered its 16th day with American tankers going down over Iraqi airspace and oil above $99 a barrel. Ukraine is absorbing Russian strikes at a pace that has exhausted European air defense stockpiles. The South China Sea recorded its most dangerous naval standoff in 4 years last week. Into all of that volatility, into all of that accumulated tension, Kim Jong-un has just introduced a new variable that nobody in any of those theaters fully accounted for. He has declared that Israel crossed the final line. He has invoked the language of total mobilization. And he has done it publicly through state media in a statement designed to be read not just in Jerusalem but in Washington, Seoul, Beijing and Moscow simultaneously, and that is not an accident, that is a coordinated signal. Now here is what maximum wartime mobilization actually looks like in practice, because this phrase needs to be unpacked carefully. In North Korean military doctrine, a wartime mobilization declaration triggers a specific sequence of actions inside the Korean People's Army reserve units are called up. Artillery batteries along the demilitarized zone move from standby to active targeting posture. Naval vessels in the Yellow Sea and the Sea of Japan shift from patrol patterns to intercept formations. And missile launch crews at sites across the country move from maintenance rotations to active launch readiness cycles. As of 1 hour ago, South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed that unusual movement has been detected at multiple North Korean military installations. They are not yet calling it a mobilization. They are calling it elevated activity requiring continuous monitoring. And that careful language is the language of a military trying to avoid triggering the very escalation it is preparing to respond to. The United States has treaty obligations that activate the moment South Korea's security is threatened. The Mutual Defense Treaty signed in 1953 commits Washington to treat an attack on South Korea as an attack on the United States, and the 28,500 American troops currently stationed on the Korean Peninsula are not there as observers. They are there as a tripwire. And the current American military posture is already stretched to a degree not seen since the early 2000s. A carrier strike group committed to the Persian Gulf, another operating in the Western Pacific. And that battery is redeployed from South Korea to the Middle East, leaving the Korean Peninsula with a thinner missile defense shield at the exact moment Kim Jong-un is making wartime declarations. That is not a coincidence. Kim Jong-un missed. He watches American force posture the way a chess player watches his opponent's pieces. And right now he is looking at a board where significant American assets have been committed to one side while the other side sits comparatively exposed. Japan convened an emergency session of its National Security Council within 30 minutes of the North Korean statement reaching Tokyo, because Japan understands what a North Korean wartime mobilization means for the shipping lanes that carry 90% of its energy imports, and for a population of 125 million. People living on a chain of islands that sits directly between the Korean Peninsula and the open Pacific with no geographic buffer and no strategic depth. Now connect this to Russia, because Moscow's fingerprints are on the Damascus facility that was just destroyed, and Moscow's response will determine whether this stays contained or accelerates into something categorically more dangerous. Vladimir Putin has spent the last 3 years building a relationship with Kim Jong-un that goes far beyond transactional arms dealing. Russian and North Korean military delegations have met 17 times in the past 14 months. Russian technical advisors have been documented inside North Korean missile testing facilities, and Kim Jong-un visited Moscow personally and was given a tour of Russian defense infrastructure that no foreign leader had been shown in over 30 years. Tonight, with a North Korean facility in Damascus destroyed by an Israeli strike, Putin is making a calculation that will define the next phase of this crisis. Does Russia treat the Damascus strike as an attack on a shared operational asset? Or does Moscow use its back-channel relationship with Kim to manage the escalation before it spins beyond anyone's ability to control? The Kremlin has not yet issued a formal statement, and that silence is being read in every foreign ministry on earth right now, and the reading is not reassuring. Beijing is watching all of this with a kind of focused attention that precedes a major strategic decision, calculating quietly, waiting to see which way the crisis moves before committing to a position, and that waiting is itself dangerous, because the absence of a Chinese stabilizing signal is being interpreted in Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington as permission for the situation to escalate further. Now bring it back to the human reality on the ground, because geopolitical chain reactions are not abstractions. They are decisions made by specific people under specific pressures that produce consequences for millions of people who had no say in any of it. The 28,500 American troops currently stationed in South Korea woke up this morning to a world that had not yet produced a North Korean wartime mobilization statement, and they will go to sleep tonight in a world that has the South Korean population of 52 million people lives within artillery range of the North Korean border. Seoul, a city of 10 million, sits 35 miles from the demilitarized zone, and North Korean long-range artillery systems can reach the South Korean capital in under 3 minutes. By destroying that facility in Damascus, Israel accomplished two things simultaneously. It disrupted the immediate operational coordination happening inside that hub, and it forced every member of that network to make a public response to a public provocation in real time under maximum international scrutiny. That is an extraordinarily high-risk strategic gamble, and the next 72 hours will reveal whether it was worth it. First, does Kim Jong-un follow his wartime mobilization declaration with a concrete military action that transforms rhetoric into operational reality? Second, does Russia use its relationship with Pyongyang to manage Kim's response? Or does Moscow calculate that a North Korean escalation serves Russian interests by stretching American military attention across two simultaneous crisis theaters? Third, does the United States invoke its treaty obligations to South Korea and Japan in a way that formally draws Washington into a second front at the exact moment it is already committed to the most intensive Middle East military operation in 2 decades? Benjamin Netanyahu believed the Damascus facility represented an imminent threat to Israeli security, believed the window to act was closing, and believed the consequences of inaction outweighed the consequences of action. He may have been right about all 3 of those assessments, but right and wise are not always the same thing. Kim Jong-un said there is no going back. He has said things like that before, but he has never said it in the context of a direct strike on a facility where North Korean military personnel were present, and he has never said it while Russia and Iran are simultaneously engaged in active military conflict with American and Israeli forces at a moment when the international system's capacity to absorb additional shocks is this depleted. The one thing every North Korea analyst agrees on is this: Kim Jong-un does not make statements he intends to walk away from without cost. And the cost of walking away from no return is his own credibility inside the system that keeps him in power, and that is the one cost he will never willingly pay. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because the next 48 hours will answer the question that every defense ministry, every intelligence agency, and every allied capital is asking right now. Did Netanyahu just strike a blow that protects Israel and fractures the axis supplying its enemies, or did he just hand Kim Jong-un the justification he needed to take this crisis somewhere the world is not prepared to follow? Tell me in the comments, do you believe Kim Jong-un will back down, or does the logic of his own survival make escalation the only move left on the board?